It's the OG Fact Checker, here to give you a juicy tidbit of history that's verified. Big announcement. I've decided to use an acronym for the OG Fact Checker, TOFC. I'm former military, and we slap an acronym on everything. I'm going to do something different for this TOFC post. Instead of focusing on a person or a group of people, I'll discuss the timeline in this book, Black Firsts, but with a few minor adjustments by me. I use this book to jump off my research of people I want to showcase. I've had this book for over 20 years, and I've only noticed this pullout just recently. My abbreviated timeline covers the late 1800s through the 1970s. I'm not trying to do a history of the world type thing. As I look through this timeline, one thing jumps out at me. World War II was really a pivotal point for Blacks in America. From the emancipation of slaves to the start of World War II, you see the slow awakening of Blacks realizing they were entitled to the same rights as whites, and a focus on proving ourselves more than just cheap labor. Blacks are showing their intellect, creativity, and ingenuity, and they're finding white allies to help them fight for the rights in the courts and in Congress. In 1868, the 14th Amendment guaranteeing citizenship for those born or naturalized in this country is passed. In 1870, the 15th Amendment solidifies the voting rights of all citizens. In 1875, a civil rights bill banning discrimination in public accommodations is passed by Congress, but this bill is overturned by the Supreme Court in 1883, and then separate but equal public facilities is reaffirmed by Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. Unions for farm workers are being formed in secret, risking death by white farm owners. You also see Blacks taking control of their education with the help of the clergy and the establishment of historically Black colleges and universities. Blacks are driven to be educated, and more are seeking law degrees because it was clear the only path to equality was in the courts. Black businesses are established in Black-only communities and towns. You have the formation of the precursor to the NAACP in 1905. In 1910, the National Urban League is born. Blacks, men, and women volunteer in numbers when World War I hits in 1914, but in segregated troops. The Harlem Renaissance pops off in 1922, and in 1925, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters is formed by A. Philip Randolph. Jesse Owens pisses off Hitler at the Olympic Games in Berlin, Germany in 1936, and Joe Louis becomes the heavyweight boxing champion of the world in 1937. Then World War II surges forward in 1939, and the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941 means the U.S. now has a dog in the fight alongside England and Russia. If World War I didn't do enough to prove the bravery of Blacks, World War II corrected that. The war also gave Latinos, the Navajo, Asians, and women, both Black and white, a chance to prove their worth and defend this country. Even the indigenous tribes and communities along the coast of Alaska, like the Tlingit, the Aleut, the Tsimshian, and the Haida, joined the newly formed Alaska Territorial Guard. These unpaid volunteers were given a uniform, a rifle, and an Army training manual, and were the eyes and ears of the Alaskan coast for the military. Then, something interesting happens in 1952. The Tuskegee Institute reports that for the first time in 71 years that they have been keeping statistics, there were no lynchings. The fight for the civil rights intensifies. In 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, rules that segregation in schools is unconstitutional, and it overturns Plessy versus Ferguson. From there, we have Rosa Parks refusing to follow Jim Crow laws to change her bus seat in 1955, and a 13-month bus boycott that squeezes the South financially. The 1956 case, Browder versus Gale, rules bus segregation is unconstitutional in November of that year, and all laws requiring segregated seating on buses were struck down. By 1960, the court cases are heating up and frustration is building in the streets. Boycotts now extend to sit-ins at lunch counters and other public spaces throughout the South, but they were peaceful. In 1963, there's the March on Washington, D.C., and Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and JFK's assassination in November of that year. The good news is that one key amendment and one key law are passed in 1964. The 24th Amendment says it's unconstitutional to charge voters a poll tax to stop people from voting. And the Civil Rights Act, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, bans discrimination or discriminatory practices in employment and desegregates businesses and public spaces. I think it's safe to say all hell breaks loose between 1965 and 1969, and the peaceful sit-ins turn into something much darker. In 1965, Malcolm X is assassinated in February, and the Watts riots in August results in 3,500 arrests and $225 million in property damage. With inflation, that would be a little over $2.2 billion. The Black Panther Party is formed in 1966 while riots break out across the country. In 1969, the year Loving versus Virginia ruled that denying Richard Loving, a white man, and Mildred Loving, a black woman, from getting married was unconstitutional. The riots across the country get worse. And to top it all off, Dr. King is assassinated in 1968. That decade ends on a somewhat good note. The Supreme Court rules all school districts need to desegregate. The 1970s was the decade of firsts. The first black mayors of New York, New Jersey, Los Angeles, California, Atlanta, Georgia, and Detroit, Michigan. Alex Haley's Roots, the Saga of an American Family, is broadcast in 1977, and 2 years later, Roots, The Next Generation, is broadcast. The last bit of legislature somewhat related to civil rights was the repeal by the state legislature of Louisiana regarding racial classification, specifically the criterion for classifying a person who has 1/32 Negro blood as black. You can see from this non-inclusive civil rights timeline that the fight for equality was real, it was bloody and violent, and it required the sacrifices of a lot of lives. And that fight ain't over. I love history. The more you know.